Imagine waking up one day to find your passport revoked, not because you broke the law, not because of criminal charges, but because a government official decided your political beliefs counted as supporting terrorism. That's almost what happened last week in Washington, when a proposal backed by Republican Rep. Brian Mast and Secretary of State Marco Rubio sparked outrage across the country. Critics said it gave Rubio thought police powers to strip Americans of one of their most basic rights, the ability to travel freely. Today we're breaking down what this bill was, why civil liberties advocates were terrified, and why the backlash forced Mast to backtrack. Let's start with the basics. Rep. Brian Mast of Florida quietly introduced a measure as part of a larger State Department reorganization bill. On the surface, it looked technical, but hidden inside was a provision that would give the Secretary of State the authority to revoke or deny U.S. passports if they believed someone had provided what's called material support to terrorism. Now here's where it gets tricky. Material support is a broad term. It doesn't only mean funding terrorist groups or carrying out attacks. Courts have sometimes applied it to speech, advocacy, or even peaceful associations. So the big fear was this. With Marco Rubio in charge of the State Department, could critics of U.S. foreign policy, especially critics of Israel, be targeted under this law? Why was Rubio specifically singled out? Because as Secretary of State under Donald Trump, Rubio has already taken aggressive steps against pro-Palestinian voices. Reports show he supported revoking green cards and student visas from non-citizens who spoke out against Israel. So imagine handing him the power to revoke citizens' passports too. That's where the phrase thought police started circulating. Civil liberties advocates said this wasn't about fighting terrorism, it was about punishing dissent. The story really exploded after journalists at The Intercept reported on the proposal. Within hours, civil rights groups like the ACLU sounded the alarm. Kia Hamadanchi, an ACLU attorney, called the bill hugely problematic and warned that it opened the door to politicized enforcement. Translation: if the Secretary of State doesn't like your political views, they could take away your passport. Activists, students, and advocacy groups flooded social media with criticism. And by Sunday night, Mast had introduced what's called a manager's amendment. In plain English, that means he pulled the controversial passport provision out of the bill. The change isn't official until it's approved in committee, but for now it's a major walkback. So how did Mast explain the about-face? A spokesperson for the House Foreign Affairs Committee brushed it off, saying the language shouldn't be controversial, and that they didn't want a distraction overshadowing the bigger State Department bill. Basically, they claimed it was just a small piece of a much larger reform package, not some authoritarian power grab, but the fact that they dropped it so quickly shows they understood how radioactive it had become. Now let's zoom out. This proposal is part of a much broader trend in U.S. politics right now, where dissent, especially criticism of Israel or U.S. foreign policy, is being linked to terrorism. In July, the House already passed a bill punishing so-called politically motivated boycotts of Israel. And Trump's administration has cracked down on international students, revoking visas from those who participated in pro-Palestine demonstrations. So while this specific passport proposal has been pulled, the underlying push to silence dissent is still very much alive. And here's the chilling part. It's not just about free speech. It's about the government claiming the power to define what counts as supporting terrorism and then punishing people for it. That's a slippery slope. If you think this sounds like a technical legal fight, think again. Your passport is one of your most important rights as a citizen. It's your connection to the outside world. Revoking it is a serious punishment, usually reserved for people convicted of major crimes. But under Mast's proposal, that punishment could have been handed out based on suspicion, not conviction, on political judgment, not proven facts. Civil liberties groups are warning that even though this specific fight was won, the threat isn't going away. Future bills could try to sneak in similar language. So here's where we are. Brian Mast proposed giving Marco Rubio sweeping power to revoke U.S. passports. Civil liberties advocates cried foul, calling it an attack on free speech and political dissent. After backlash, Mast backtracked and pulled the provision, for now. But the bigger battle over free speech, dissent, and the definition of terrorism is far from over. What do you think? Was this just a misunderstanding blown out of proportion, or was it a real attempt to hand the government thought police powers? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this breakdown useful, hit the like button, subscribe and share this video. More people need to understand how these quiet policy changes can have massive impacts on our freedoms. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.